All right. I'm sure it's got you guys thinking about the toughest opponents that you've faced. So Graham, let's start with you. Who have you gone for?
Well, when I was asked the question, Dave,
I started to do it, and then I just came back to this. I just picked the best team I'd ever played against. This, for me, was the best team that's never won a World Cup. This was '82, the Brazilian team. And when you look at the midfield, Falcao, Socrates, the boy Junior never gets mentioned as a great in Brazilian terms, but believe me, he was. And then arguably the best player I ever played against, Zico. Serginho was a fabulous player. Cerezo, who ended up going to Sampdoria after I left there. I played against him in the European Cup final when he was playing for Roma. And this was a team that, this was how you imagine Brazilian football to be. They're just on the front foot all the time. And it's the only game of football I've ever played in where I felt within the first 5 minutes, we don't have a chance here. We just don't have a chance. I can remember we played them in '82 in Seville. And you go out to warm up, and Seville's one of the hottest cities in Spain in the summer. Inland, no breeze, stinking hot. So we go out to warm up, come back in, you're covered in sweat, you put your head under the cold shower, and you go back out, and you're lined up. I'm the captain, I'm lined up. To my right is a linesman, a referee, and another linesman, Socrates, and then all of them. Now I look down to the left where, a Scottish, Peely Wally Scotsman, he's white-skinned, freckles, looks like he's just played 90 minutes. And I'm thinking, we don't look in great shape. And then I look to the right, and I can see Socrates and the rest of them that don't have a bead of sweat on the strip. And you're thinking, we've got big problems today. And that's how it panned out. We made the mistake of scoring first, and then they just went to another level. It was like, going from second gear in your car to fifth. They were a fantastic team, just threats from everywhere.
Graham, was there no one? I know you picked that Brazil team, and it was a very famous team. But was there anyone sort of where you come up against in Italy? I know you mentioned Zico there, but I mean, would Maradona have been playing there? Was he closer? When you were thinking about these teams, maybe compromising, getting individual players in.
Jamie, in the 80s, it was a bit like what the Premier League is now, where everybody, unless you can go to Barcelona, Real Madrid, maybe Bayern Munich you would choose before coming to the Premier League. But, all the big players were in Italy in the 80s. I was 31 when I went there. I just won the European Cup with Liverpool. And I think, I really fancied, the challenge. I wanted to test myself again. So I went up there, and I'm trying to think, again, whether I've got selective memory or not, or I've got...
that normally happens every Sunday, that.
Yeah, no, I was trying to choose my worst person. I was just such a high opinion of myself, or had a high opinion of myself as a player. I don't think I played against anyone and thought, well, he's seen me off today. He's played me off the park today. Because in those days, if you were playing a game of football and it wasn't quite working, the rules were different, and you could get away with a bit more mischief in those days, to put it politely. So you could test them. Not just in the football sense, you can test them if you really fancied the physical aspect. So it wasn't, obviously Maradona was just off the scale as well, in terms of power and technique and close control, goals, the vision he saw, the vision he had, the passes he chose when, whatever pitch he had in his head was off the scale. I've mentioned this to you before. I am going back to my generation. In the football in the 80s, where you were allowed to be a bit more physical. There was only two players. Should be a quiz question, Dave. There's only two players I never managed to lay a finger on. One was English, and the other one was Zico. So who was the English one that I never managed to get anywhere near in terms of trying to put him off physically? Try to make him think twice about getting on the ball and being cute. Who was the English one? There's only two.
Well, I know the answer.
Dave?
I know the answer.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I know the answer.
So we've had this conversation.
Yeah, because you told me before, and I'm not bored of hearing the story because it's Alan Ball, someone that probably we forget the talents that we've had in this country.
Oh, well, Alan Ball was just on another planet. he played 1 and 2 touch. He didn't dwell on the ball. He couldn't make a challenge on him. He was just too cute. So I was a young man, 19, playing against him for Middlesbrough at Ayresome Park, and I'm lunging into challenges. I'm going to the ground. I'm trying to catch him. We came out for the second half. He was playing for Arsenal. Came out for the second half, and the whole second half was him going woof woof to me, and I'm chasing him from Ayresome Park for 45 minutes. And I never ever laid a finger on him.
What did he do, Graham?
That was a growling like a dog and woof woof.
That's how you got up this morning.
Yeah.
Graham, for our younger viewers who perhaps won't remember and haven't seen Zico, how would you compare him to a modern day footballer? What were his talents?
Well, again, another story, Dave. At the end of the first year, they picked the top undici. A top 11 players to play against the league champions who won Serie A. And it was Verona. So they picked 11 players. We turned up. All the top men were there. Now, I'm playing the same team as Zico. And I'm standing behind him on 3 or 4 occasions. When the ball's coming out of the sky or it's being passed to him, I don't have to concentrate on the ball. I'm looking where he's going to pass the ball. On 4 or 5 occasions, he's made completely different choice to the one I would have made. So that's the point I'd like to make. That the picture he saw in his head, it wasn't just about making that pass. It was about when I've made that pass, what happens after that. So this is what separates the true superstars to the really good players to the average players to bang average players. Picture that.
All right, Jamie, you've had some. You've had some great games in Europe, playing for England as well. So you could have picked from a whole galaxy of players yourself. Let's have a look at your 1 to 11, Jamie. There it is. Talk us through that then. What were the easy decisions, if you like, Jamie, for you?
Well, I think the easiest ones are possibly the fullbacks, and come up against them in 2005 in the Champions League final, and they weren't just the best fullbacks of their generation. I actually believe they're the 2 best fullbacks of all time. In some ways, I don't think there's many arguments possibly with that, with Paolo Maldini and Cafu. Goalkeeping-wise, I picked Buffon. Born on the same day as him, scored against him, so it always gives me a chance to get that story in. But he was a great goalkeeper. I certainly think the best of his generation. Centre-back-wise, Desailly. I don't think Desailly possibly in the Premier League showed possibly what he'd shown before, maybe certainly at AC Milan. But in certain games against Liverpool, it was like men against boys, really, when he really wanted to turn it on. And John Terry, for me, has been the best Premier League centre-back, certainly in my time watching football. There's plenty of foreign other centre-backs I could have put in there, but I think I wanted to put John Terry in there, get a Premier League player in there, and I think he's been as good as anyone. I think the midfield, in terms of Xavi and Iniesta, I think picks itself. I think what they did for Barcelona, absolute superstars, the 2 of them. I mean, I wanted Roy Keane probably a little bit more central, more of the holding position there. So he'd be centre. Now, I was actually thinking what other players you'd come against. You think of maybe like a Pirlo, who's a completely different player to Roy Keane in that position. But I think what Roy Keane would give you in that position, sitting in front of a back 4, organising, the energy, challenges, playing from there. And then I look at that front 3, and I think certainly anyone from my generation, it would be Messi and Ronaldo and one other. And that one other for me would be Thierry Henry, who I think is the greatest Premier League player of all time, and certainly my toughest opponent. And I think that Arsenal team he played in, the Invincibles, and 2 or 3 years around that would certainly be the toughest opponent I played, and that's certainly at home and abroad. So yes, very fortunate to come up against some of the the best players in the world at that time through the success we had at different seasons with Liverpool.
Was it the pace and physicality of Thierry, as well as the skill, that made him such a difficult player to face?
Yes, because Graham mentioned something before. When you're not having a great day as a player, probably 20, 30 years ago, you could leave one on someone physically. And that was still part of my game. Even in the modern day, you have to be really careful in terms of cards. But you think, well, okay, if someone's got better ability than me, okay, can I, rattle them early on, put a really tough challenge on, will they fancy it? The problem with Thierry Henry was when you're actually getting the tunnel, certainly with that Arsenal team as well, everyone was 6'2". Everyone had shoulders out here, and it was almost, you look at the physical battle, you couldn't knock them off the stride. Really, they were too physically strong for you at different times. And as I said, Graham mentioned before about the Brazil game, where he knew within 5 minutes he couldn't go on and win the game. Really, it was going to be tough. At times, you had that feeling in the tunnel with Arsenal when you just come up alongside them and the sheer size of them. And you know how great they were as players, but sometimes you have to stand alongside someone to really understand, the sheer physicality of that team. And even someone like Bergkamp was a huge man as well. So that's why I always choose those, certainly that team of Arsene Wenger and Arsenal as my toughest opponent.
Question from Lawrence on Twitter, Jamie. How close did Gary Neville get to your toughest 11?
Well, certainly if I was doing Premier League 11, Gary Neville would be really close. No, but I think there's a fella who plays for Liverpool now, thinks he's going to take that mantle from Gary. And I'm sure he was a young lad watching Monday Night Football when I said those immortal words of no one wants to grow up and be a Gary Neville. And looks like Trent Alexander-Arnold's proved me wrong, and certainly Gary Neville wrong in terms of actually ability-wise. Because I think in a few years' time, when we're talking about Premier League 11s of all time, I think it'll be the lad from Liverpool, not the lad from Manchester.
Yeah, what a player he is. Graham, we've got a few questions on this. We were talking about Spurs' decision earlier to overturn their furloughing. That leaves just Newcastle and Norwich in the Premier League as having furloughed non-playing staff. Do you think there'll be now more pressure on those two clubs? I know they're very different in terms of their business models.
Oh yeah, enormous. Spurs with their turnover, I would imagine somewhere near 500 million. Liverpool the same. When you look at Newcastle and you look at Norwich, they don't have the same numbers. Don't have the same strength financially going forward. The people in Newcastle, I think, will bring the people of Newcastle, not outside. Newcastle's a proper city, proper football city. Salty earth type individuals that live up there. They'll tell you exactly how it is. And I don't think they'll be slow in putting their own club under pressure. Norwich,
all right, Graham.
No, possibly the same.